Helly wakes up lying on a table in front of a speaker, from which an unknown voice persistently asks her name. The girl tries to come to her senses and understand what's happening, but the voice doesn't answer her questions, repeating the same thing and insisting that Helly must undergo a short survey. Realizing she can't leave the room, she agrees to the testing, but immediately realizes she knows none of the answers. She can't remember her own name, the state she was born in, or even what her mother looks like. Confused, Helly sits down on the floor, and at that moment, the door to the room opens. In the doorway, she sees the silhouette of a man. Shortly before this, sitting in his car, Mark Scout is having a breakdown, unable to stop crying. Finally, he composes himself, wipes his face and steps outside, then heads to work at the large Lumon Company building as if nothing happened. In the locker room, Scout changes his shoes, watch, and pass, swapping his name tag for a blue square with the company's logo. At the entrance, a guard searches him with a device resembling a metal detector, after which the clerk enters an elevator where he experiences slight dizziness that completely alters his state of mind. Easily navigating the maze of long, pristine corridors, Mark reaches his office designed for 4 clerks, labeled as the Macro Data Refinement Department. Each employee, sitting at their personal computer, selects random numbers from a multitude displayed on the screen. After a few minutes of work, Scout realizes that only 2 of his colleagues are present today. Pity, his partner and best friend, unexpectedly didn't come to work without notifying anyone. Milchick, the deputy director with a smile, enters the office and invites Mark to come with him. The men arrive at the office of Harmony Coble, the department head, who talks to the employee as if all her words are memorized in advance. She places a speaker in front of her, through which the board of directors participates in the meeting, but Mark hears nothing but strange hissing. Coble informs the clerk that Pity no longer works at the company, which greatly surprises and upsets Mark. No explanation for the news follows, but Mark is appointed the new team lead, replacing his good friend. Immediately after the appointment, Milchick leads Mark to a room with a microphone and monitors, where he will greet a new company employee for the first time. Thus, Mark becomes the voice and silhouette that Helly first encountered. When Scout enters the room with the frightened girl, he calmly starts explaining to her that she is now a Lumen employee. Ignoring Helly's questions and objections, Mark begins to read her important information about the importance of separating work and personal life until the girl finally loses it, throwing the speaker at the head of the boring man. But Helly fails to leave again and obediently sits down to listen to Mark, who seems to be about to clarify the situation. Unable to bear it any longer, Mark, breaking all instructions, hints to Helly that she needs to ask to leave 3 times, and after that, he finally leads her out of the room, also guiding her through the numerous white corridors. Eventually, the pair arrive at an exit, which states that separated passage is prohibited, and Mark tells the girl she can leave the building. However, when Helly steps out the door, she finds herself in the same place she just left. Mark takes Helly to Harmony's office, who welcomes the new employee and gives her a disc, which should finally clarify everything. On it, the girl sees herself addressing herself, saying that she voluntarily participates in a program to separate consciousness into work and personal, where in each reality she will not remember another one. At 5 p.m., the workday in the offices ends, and the employees leave the building. Coming out of the elevator, none of them remembers where and how they worked, their colleagues, or anything from the day. When Mark almost hits Helly with his car, he doesn't recognize her, just as she doesn't recognize him. On the windshield of the car, the man finds an envelope from the company stating he accidentally fell at work, and as an apology, the company gifts him a certificate to a nice restaurant. Naturally, he also doesn't remember that the bruise on his forehead appeared after interacting with Helly. Returning home, Mark confronts his strange neighbor, Mrs. Selvig, after which he plans to spend the evening as usual in front of the TV. But his pregnant sister Devon arrives and drags him to a dinner party with friends to shake up her relative who, in this reality, cannot get over his wife's death, which led him to agree to the severance procedure to sometimes forget his pain. The company gathers at the table of the strange hosts, who announce a dinner without food, serving only a glass of water. Rickon, Devon's husband, raises the topic of Mark being separated, which causes debates at the table. Devon convinces her brother to stay overnight, and the young people talk late into the night, reminiscing about their childhood and parents. Waking up at night to drink water, Mark Scout sees a strange man in the yard, hiding behind a tree and watching him. The next day, Mark decides to use the certificate and goes to the restaurant, where this same man joins him at the table and demands he hang up the phone during a conversation with his neighbor. The man turns out to be Mark's best friend, his partner Pitty, whom he doesn't remember in this reality. He hands his colleague an envelope with an address where he can be found and short explanations that he managed to remember everything despite the severance operation. Mrs. Selvig waits for her neighbor and apologizes to him for the constant conflicts over the trash bins. The woman caringly asks the man to sleep more and take care of himself. Looking at her, Mark doesn't recognize his boss, Harmony Coble, and it's hard to tell if the boss knows they are also neighbors or if she also lives in two personalities. Helly continues her training at Lumen, but the girl still can't grasp what happened, despite Milchick explaining the severance operation to her in detail several times. A new workday begins. Mark tidies up the office, drinks coffee, and while wiping his desk, he focuses on a group photo featuring himself and his colleagues, including Pitty. He gathers identical pictures from all 4 desks and hides them in a closet to avoid being upset over his missing friend. When all the employees gather in the office, Mark explains to Helly what their job entails. She doesn't quite understand the purpose of searching for numbers, but she sits down and stares at the monitor along with the others. During the workday, the girl learns that her other version, the one living outside Lumen, is called an extra, but there's no way to communicate with her as the guard at the entrance checks for any text codes. Milchick gathers the team for a regular game where each participant talks about everything they remember and know, as well as their feelings and emotions. At the meeting, Mark shares his concerns about Pitty, saying he doesn't know if his friend is even alive. Milchick abruptly stops such conversations, reminding everyone that there are no deceased at Lumen as the company takes care of its employees. The team's fun ends with a new group photo, but Helly suddenly announces that she doesn't want to work there and plans to leave. Eventually, the girl realizes that this version of her can't leave the Lumen building at all. Moreover, the rebel ends up in the hands of Mr. Reiner, the head of security, but Mark manages to save his friend, preventing the boss from taking her to the break room. Returning home, Mark plans to read the postcard left by Pitty, but a knock at the door distracts him. Mrs. Selvig decides to visit her neighbor and offer him homemade cookies as an apology. After seeing off the guest, the man falls asleep and only remembers the letter the next morning. Calling in sick to work, he decides to skip a day and drives to the address mentioned in the postcard, finding an abandoned area of the city where he discovers his friend in an old greenhouse. One of Mark's colleagues, elderly Irving, falls asleep at his desk and gets a reprimand from the management before being sent to the staff psychologist. There, while waiting for his appointment, he meets Bert, a similarly aged employee from another department. Meeting Pitty, Mark learns about the restroom where employees monotonously apologize for their work misdemeanors. Pitty, who managed to cancel the severance, reveals that something terrible is happening at the company, which is why he is now being hunted. Mark takes his friend home and houses him in his basement. Pitty constantly suffers from headaches and hallucinations, often feeling like he's back at work. When he recovers, he tells Mark that there is no double life, and while they sit there, their other selves continue working in the office. Despite all the details, Mark repeats that he doesn't want to cancel the severance to avoid remembering his deceased wife. But Pitty tells his colleague that he has seen him with red eyes at work because even there he feels his pain, just not remembering what caused it. Reading the news in the morning, Mark announces that Helly's extra refused her resignation from Lumen. Pitty remains in the house alone and hears the door open upstairs. Watching from hiding, he recognizes his former boss in the uninvited guest. Helly constantly tries to pass a note to her extra, but Mark carefully watches the girl, and even when she decides to swallow a pen cap with the message inside, he informs her that the detector will show that too, leading to an unpleasant procedure to extract it. In the corridor, the office employees meet their colleagues, among whom is Bert, Irving's friend. The men exchange a few standard phrases and wink at each other. The entire company goes to the Personality Center to learn more about the creators and managers of Lumen, and Helly again uses the situation to try to escape. This time, Mark fails to cover for his friend, and Mr. Reiner takes the girl to the restroom, where she is forced to repeat words of apology and penance over 1,000 times for her behavior until she repents. Mark sees that the photos from the group photo session have arrived and decides to replace the old ones. Removing the pictures from their frames, he discovers a floor plan drawn by Pitty on one of them. At the same time, Pitty makes it to a night store and collapses there, unconscious. The ambulance is unable to help the man in time. All of this happens in front of Mark, and he quickly rushes home, where he removes all traces of his guest's stay in the basement. Having turned off the lights, he hears his colleague's mobile phone vibrating. Bert visits to give Irving the bags they sew in their department ahead of the others, and also invites his friend to visit their office, to which Irving happily agrees. Helly returns to the office completely depressed after spending a whole day in the test. Mark tries to reason with his friend and make sure she doesn't provoke conflicts anymore. But finding the photo with the floor plan drawn by Pitty in Mark's desk, Helly accuses her colleague of hypocrisy as he convinces her to accept their situation, yet keeps such things himself. Bert shows Irving paintings in his department and at one point touches his friend's hand, after which Irving embarrassedly runs back to his workstation. Devin's husband leaves a gift on Mark's doorstep, his own book about the meaning of life without severance. However, when Harmony broke into her neighbor's house, she took the book and brought it to work. Returning to the office, Irving noticed the bright cover, but besides the book itself, he was surprised by something else. The first page had a dedication stating the book was intended for Mark Scout. Irving brought his colleague to explain what this all meant, but naturally Mark could not remember his relative or anything from his external life. Not wanting to give up, Helly found a paper cutter in the office and, threatening to harm herself, demanded permission to record a message for her extra. Receiving a response, she realized that it was not so much about the company as about herself. The response from Helly in the outside world was such that she should obediently continue her work at Lumen. Pitty's hidden phone in the basement keeps vibrating, but seeing an unknown number on the screen, Mark hesitates to answer the call. Mark goes to the funeral home to say goodbye to his friend and is surprised to see his neighbor, Mrs. Selvig, there, who also did not expect to meet him. Both lie to each other about the reason for their visit, but the woman keeps an eye on her neighbor. At the ceremony, Mark meets the deceased friend's ex-wife and daughter, and they immediately guess where the man knew their family head from. Waiting for everyone to be occupied with saying goodbye, Harmony sneaks up to the body and extracts the severance chip from his head. Arriving home, Mark changes his mind about going in and drives to the place where his wife once died. Harmony brings the chip to work and entrusts Milchick to check it in the laboratory to find out how the man managed to cancel the severance. Also, the woman calls Casey, asking the staff psychologist to conduct a session with Mark, as she fears he will also be tempted to cancel the severance. Locked in the bathroom, Mark reads the stolen book about the meaning of life. When it's time for the session, the man obediently comes at the appointed time. The psychologist lights a candle that Harmony stole from a box with personal belongings of Mark's deceased wife. The boss herself watches the conversation through a monitor. Helly, after saying goodbye to her colleagues, goes home. In the elevator, the girl brings a trash bin and a rope, as she can no longer endure the monotonous days without the possibility of liberation. Tying the rope to the elevator ceiling, the girl knocks the trash bin from under her feet. Mark calls the elevator at the end of the workday, and when the doors open, he sees lifeless Helly. Trying to save his colleague, he calls for help, and Mr. Reiner appears immediately, ordering Mark to quickly get into the elevator to avoid additional witnesses. Coming to work the next day, the first thing Mark remembers is the incident with Helly. Stepping onto the floor, he is immediately taken in by Harmony and Milchick, who reprimand the department head for not keeping an eye on his employee. Harmony gives Pitty's chip to Reiner and instructs him to find out who and how managed to hack it and restore the consciousness of the separated. The man asks if the head informed the board of directors about what happened to Helly, but Harmony avoids answering. Locked in the bathroom, Mark continues reading the stolen book, which increasingly inspires him. After work, the guy takes his things from the locker and sees many voice messages from Rickon, informing that Devin will soon give birth and everyone expects the brother to be with her. Mark heads straight to the maternity cottage settlement to support his relative. In a conversation with Rickon, he learns about the book he left on his porch as a surprise, but it never reached its owner. Devin steps out of the cottage to find coffee and meets another pregnant woman. The future mothers talk and discuss their unborn children, but Devin has to return as her contractions intensify. Comforting his sister, Mark shares his suspicions about Lumen and his intention to find out what the company is up to. Psychologist Miss Casey comes to the office tasked with monitoring Helly and reporting any signs of melancholy and sadness to the management. Despite the specialist's surveillance, Mark manages to take his colleague to another wing to talk without eavesdroppers. Wandering the corridors, the pair find a department where goats are raised, which greatly surprises them. This further confirms that none of the separated employees even suspect what the company is working on. Irving meets with Bert in the conference room, but their conversation is immediately interrupted by Dylan, who forbids his co-worker from interacting with an employee from another department. Miss Casey finds the runaways and brings them back to the office, watched by Harmony through a monitor. Mark explains their escape as a health walk he took his colleague on. At home, the head receives a call from Reiner, informing her that they have tracked the source of the hack on Pitty's chip. According to the security officer, it could only have been done by one person, former Lumen employee, Gabby. Mark takes out his friend's phone from the box and sees that the unknown number is still calling. After giving birth, Devon goes for a walk in the park with her baby and sees the same woman she met in the maternity cottage. Waving at her and not receiving a response, the young mother decides to approach, but it becomes clear that her friend does not remember her at all. Furthermore, the baby she holds is named differently than she extroduced him in their conversation, and when asked why the name was changed, the woman cannot answer, as if she doesn't understand the topic at all. The 4 employees of the Macro Data Refinement Department gather in the cafeteria, and Mark and Helly suggest to their colleagues that they explore the building and meet other departments. However, the timid and law-abiding Irving and Dylan do not approve of such behavior. Harmony summons Mark and informs him that Miss Casey has been punished and sent to the restroom for not keeping an eye on Helly on the day Mark took her out of the office. The 4 decide to meet Bert's department and find out what they do. While the colleagues get acquainted, Dylan explores the unfamiliar office and finds interesting cards. He manages to slip one into his pocket before an unhappy Milchick arrives to return the curious clerks to their workplace. Back in the office, they are greeted by Harmony. After solemnly singing the Lumen anthem, the head sends Mark to the restroom, where he meets an exhausted Casey. Devon looks for a lactation consultant, and her advertisement is answered by an experienced nurse. When she arrives at the home of the young parents, the woman recognizes her as her brother's neighbor, Mrs. Selvig. As soon as the helper takes the baby girl in her arms and she stops crying, the couple trusts her, and Devon doesn't question how Selvig ended up there. A boy sits in front of the TV with cartoons, closing his eyes and counting to 1,000, starting to lose count. Dylan sits in the locker room not understanding where he is, and Milchick appears, demanding to know where the clerk hid the card from the neighboring department. Suddenly, a boy bursts into the closet and jumps on Dylan's neck, calling him Dad. The man realizes that his work consciousness has been transferred to the life of his extra, and this is what his life outside Lumen looks like. Waking up at night, Mark turns on Pitty's phone and answers the call. A woman's voice understands who she is talking to and arranges a meeting. Arriving at the college, Mark meets Gabby. She was the one who installed chips in all the separated, and now she's trying to fix the situation. During the conversation, Reiner appears out of nowhere, but the woman deals with him, explaining that he poses a threat to everyone trying to pull the separated out. Gabby sends Mark home and promises to contact him to help him retrieve his another personality that is constantly at Lumen. She hands the clerk Reiner's pass, which is untraceable and opens any door, and instructs him to take it to work, hoping that the other Mark will understand how to use it. Arriving at work, Dylan inquires Milchick about what happened and who the boy was who called him Dad. The man can't think of anything else, realizing he has a different life going on somewhere else. The supervisor tries to gloss over the question, and knowing Dylan's love for rewards and incentives, promises him special bonuses, explaining that it was a random activation that went a little off plan. The employees learn that they are now working under lock and key to prevent wandering the corridors and interacting with colleagues from other departments. Harmony visits Devon's house daily as a consultant, but in reality, she tries to gather more information about Mark. Over a cup of tea, she finally learns that the man has questions and doubts about his job and already regrets having separated. Milchick comes to the office and announces a 5-minute music and dance event to keep the team's spirits up. During the dance, Mark discovers a pass in his pocket, but realizes it's probably a handover from his extra, so he hides it back to use at a more opportune moment. The music break abruptly ends as Dylan attacks Milchick, demanding he tell him about the son he accidentally saw during the switch. The clerk tells his colleagues about his awakening and how he saw his son, and now he wants to cancel the severance. Helly realizes there is some way to awaken and only needs to find out the details to return to normal life. Of the 4, only Irving disagrees with breaking the community's rules, also trying to dissuade his friends. Using Reiner's card, the group exits into the corridor. But Irving leaves his friends and heads to the neighboring department to find out what happened to his friend Bert. Mark and Helly decide not to waste time and find the control point, which can manage all Lumen employees. Taking the manual with them, the pair returns to the office to avoid being caught by Harmony. Irving arrives at the other department and finds himself at a party celebrating Bert's retirement. Horrified, he realizes he will never see his friend again and tries to explain that the only way to leave Lumen is for one reason, but everyone pretends not to hear his arguments. Dylan studies the instructions, and the employees find out that not everyone can switch. Someone has to manage the process from inside. The guy volunteers to do this so that everyone else can escape to the outside world and find those who can help them cancel the severance. Returning to his department, Irving tells his friends that he will look for a way out with them, wishing to erase Lumen from existence. Irving's extra sits on a bench in the park with his pet. Returning home, the man approaches the easel and paints a picture using only black colors. Dozens of absolutely identical black paintings already stand against the walls. Harmony calls Mark and schedules his last session with Mrs. Casey, supposedly to close the quarter. In the office, the man learns that the psychologist is working her last day and is being replaced by another specialist. The employees await Dylan's waffle party, planning to use this time for the switch. Trying to act as calm as possible, they rehearse their escape plan. The board of directors learns about the incident with Helly in the elevator and suspends Harmony from managing the company. Using the stolen pass, Mark sends his friends outside one by one, leaving himself for last. Dylan heads to the waffle party, then sneaks away to the control center to start the operation. Each employee, once in the outside world, must carefully study their extra's life and figure out who in their circle they can ask for help. Harmony, devastated by her dismissal after so many years of loyal service, is at home when the doorbell rings. Resuming her disguise as Mrs. Selvig, she opens the door to find Mark, who inquires if she'll attend the event Devin and Rickon are organizing for their book release. Initially citing poor health, Mrs. Selvig eventually agrees to attend, saying she'll arrive a bit later. When she arrives at the party, she tries to stick close to Mark to learn why he wants to leave Lumen. Dylan breaks into the control room and locks himself in, preparing to launch his friends. Reaching the controls, he pulls the levers and the process begins. Finding himself in Devin's house, Mark's extra doesn't recognize anyone. The same happens with Irving and Helly. Irving finds himself at an easel with a black canvas, while Helly is at a reception among influential people. After learning from the guest that Devin is his sister, Mark tries to speak with her alone for help, but he can't manage it due to the crowd and commotion in the house. Exploring his apartment, Irving realizes he's alone except for his dog. He finds military awards and a locked chest containing items and photos of his son who died in the war. Helly's situation is the most complex. While examining the hall, she realizes she's not just a participant in the severance program, but a direct descendant of Lumen's founders, the daughter of the current company owner. Her extra is supposed to give a speech today about the benefits of having two entities and not wasting personal life on work. At the bottom of the chest, Irving finds strange records and a map with many marks. It becomes clear his extra has long been trying to unravel Lumen's mystery. Gathering everything, he finds car keys and plans to drive to Bert, whose name he found marked on the map. Guests at Devin's house attentively listen to Rickon, but Mark is preoccupied with finding help. Noticing his boss, he doesn't immediately realize she shouldn't be there. Addressing Harmony by her last name, he inadvertently reveals himself and his plan. In a hurry, he runs to his sister, leaving Harmony in confusion. Devin hands the baby over to the feeding assistant and finally makes time for her brother, who tells her that it's actually his another person, and he urgently needs help to get out of the trap. The woman doesn't fully understand what's happening, but she tells Mark that her brother decided to have surgery, unable to cope with the pain of his wife Gemma's death. Helly, watching her own interview on huge screens advocating the benefits of severance, feels dizzy and hides in the restroom, where her father finds her and expects a vibrant and emotional performance. Mark asks his sister about his boss from Lumen being at her party, and based on Devin's description, realizes she has entrusted her child to a terrifying woman. Rushing out of the room, Devin begins searching for her daughter, but finds neither the nanny, her car, nor the girl. Eventually, a guest finds the baby carrier in an empty room. Meanwhile, Harmony races to Lumen, simultaneously calling Milchick to inform him of the emergency. The three employees have escaped to the outside world. Milchick rushes to the control room, trying to negotiate with Dylan to open the door. Realizing that bonuses and incentives won't work in this situation, the supervisor promises to tell him not only about the boy from the closet, but also about his 2 children. Dylan remains steadfast, but Milchick understands he needs to enter the room, so he cuts the belt Dylan used to lock himself in. Arriving at the specified address, Irving sees his friend from the neighboring department relaxing with a companion in his own home. Helly prepares to go on stage, intending to tell everyone the truth. Mark, left alone in the room, decides to look at family photos, and on one of them, he sees himself with his deceased wife. To his horror, it turns out to be Mrs. Casey. Harmony manages to arrive at the gala event and tells Helly she knows everything. Unfazed, Helly whispers her plans to her boss and takes the stage, despite threats that she will make her friends suffer. Irving decides to step out of the car and knocks on Bert's door to tell him the truth about working at Lumen. Mark tells his sister that his wife is alive and he knows where to find her, while Helly starts speaking from the stage, revealing that all the sweet stories about severance are pure lies and that extras suffer trapped. At that moment, Milchick cuts the belt, bursts into the control room, and pushes Dylan away from the levers. All the escapees return their extras' consciousness of personal life. This concludes the first season. Clearly, many questions remain unanswered. Most importantly, what exactly do the employees at Lumen Company do? Hopefully, we will get the answers in the second season, set to release in 2024.